This is Dr. Nadine, and in this next video, what I would like to do is talk a little bit about if you have the interest to doing raw food, how you might go about doing that. So I have to tell you my own story is with Sweetcar, and you'll see a picture of Sweetcar here in a moment. When I adopted her, she had been, in her very first heat, she had gotten pregnant through her first litter, and they were taken away, and she was literally in a household of 23 adults. And when she got to me, she had all kinds of reactions to herpes virus. She had all kinds of skin issues that have been going with her. And then she put on a lot of weight. So as a 10-pound kitty, she should be 10 pounds. She was all the way up to 13 pounds. Little Bear, because I was taught to have a dry diet and a little bit of wet. Little Bear was up to, I think, 15 pounds, and he should be at 10 pounds. And then baby Bella came to me, and she was pretty, kind of underweight a little bit. And what I can tell you is, on my journey over the last couple years, is I've really been researching grain-free foods, wet, and the different textures of wet that my kids like to have. And so you're going to be part of your own research of, do your kids like food in gravy? Do they like food in aspic? Do they like the jelly? I can definitely tell you the only thing my kids will eat is stuff that's in aspic or nothing at all. And you got to understand that when a processing plant is going to make a jelly or a gravy, they're going to put all kinds of byproducts in there. So we're looking for pure food, healthy food that's actually going to be introduced into the body. So as I'm coming along my own journey, I looked into other veterinarians, if you will, that were providing their own raw foods. I brought a couple in. I've looked at a bunch of different sources, and where I finally came down to in my own home is I make my own. And this video is going to walk you through what I personally do. Feel free to do what your own is, but be introduced to the kitties as they come by. You will be introduced to Little Bear, my little boy, baby Bella, and Sweetcar. So let's meet the kitties. This is Little Bear, and next we have baby Bella, and then we see Sweetcar. She's sitting in the basket, and then you'll also see her down on the ground, and Little Bear looking out. I think they're actually looking at squirrels outside the window. So just say hi to the kids. All of these kids are rescues, and so it's just really lovely to have them be part of the family. So next we're going to talk about how to choose your organ meats. We definitely want to be looking at the hearts, the livers, the gizzards, and for those of you who have dogs, you'll definitely want to pick up some beef organs as well. What I found with cats is that if you are going to use beef liver, do it sparingly. It's very, very rich for them. So if I'm doing beef liver, I'm probably only going to give them beef liver maybe once a week. So the next thing we want to talk about when we're cutting up the gizzards, so I'm going to focus on gizzards because that's basically what I have here, is gizzards and hearts. And for cats, you want to cut them up into about the size of your little pinky fingernail. If you're cutting things up for dogs, you'll want to use about the size of your thumbnail. And I just keep cutting everything into parts and pieces until I have enough for either that meal. But personally, I like to take the entire package and cut them all up into smaller pieces, and then I store them in these little snack Ziploc bags because they freeze really, really well. So when we're actually going to split this up into the dishes, we want to start small when we're actually introducing raw food, and I found that about a teaspoon of raw is where you want to start. My family is up to like a 3-finger pinch. So still it's about a tablespoon of their raw cut up meat, and I'm just spreading, each of them get about that 3-finger push into the dishes, so you can just see about how much is here. If you notice, I put a little bit more into Little Bear's dish because as a boy he processes a lot quicker, he has a higher energy level, and he requires a little bit more than everyone else. I've also learned that Sweetcar steals out of his dish, so I actually put less in hers because I know she's going to steal out of his dish. It's now time to add in our portion of wet food. And when I first started feeding wet, we were using a large can, and I discovered pretty quickly that my cats do not like cold food. So when we would take the larger can and split it into 4 pieces, because they would each get 1/4 of a can in each feeding, that we always had to put something in the refrigerator. And with this process, since I'm now introducing the raw, we've actually gone down to the smaller size can, and I will actually split this small can 3 ways, evenly between all 3 dishes. Now notice here that I put a little bit more in Little Bears, and if you look at the right, you'll see that beautiful heart that's sitting to the side in amongst the gizzards. Next, we're going to add in a healthy fat, and I like to use omega-3s. The beautiful thing that I have found is this one called Omega Ease. It's beautiful for both cats and dogs, and there is a pump or a suggested serving size for each of your animals. For the kitties, it's actually 1/4 of a teaspoon, and so I've taken 3 of their servings. I found this scoop. I marked out where 3 servings would be, and so all that I have to do now when I'm doing my oil is fill up to that line, and then I drizzle that evenly between each of the 3 dishes. If you have dogs, obviously your serving size is going to be different than what I'm using. The next thing we want to talk about is making sure that we are promoting a healthy hydration so that we don't have to deal with any type of urinary tract infections or dehydrations in our loved little babies. So I have taken into the practice of adding in more water into the mix here. So what I've discovered for my kids, they don't like it soupy, but they do like to have water involved, and they like warm water versus cold water. So I just started playing around, and what we've actually landed on is 1/4 of a cup of warm water. I put that 1/4 of a cup into the empty can, and that allows me to clean that out and get all of the, yummies that are on the sides of the can. And then I use the small scoop that was found with the oil, and I stir that all in, so I'm getting the oil back into the can. And then both Sweet Car and Baby Bella each get 2 scoops of the water, and then it turns out that there's 4 more of those little scoops that go on to Little Bear's food. And then once all the warm water is in there, then I make sure that I really stir that up very carefully so that all the textures are blended, so that you have the wet and the raw chunks of meat, the oil, all of that is nicely blended into this wet mixture. It's now time to put the finishing touches on dinner time. And in the mornings, everybody gets a probiotic each broken up on top of their food. And in the evenings, they get a couple dental chews on top of their food, in addition to their dry. And remember, I told you that Sweet Car needs to have less of the dry than everybody else. So I have 2 scoops, and she gets 1 scoop of the small, and each of the other kids get 1 scoop of the large. So we're looking at what, a 1/2 of a tablespoon and a tablespoon here, basically is all the dry food that they're getting. And remember, we talked earlier in the video about if I have too much dry food, I can't process that. There's no way my metabolism can process that, and that's what causes the imbalance and disease in animals and all the issues in animals. So by shifting over to wet, they still want to have some crunch. So by putting these little tiny, pieces on top, notice I don't stir those in, they stay on top. And once the dry food's put on top, literally I'm now ready to put the dishes around the room where each of them have their feeding spots. And I call out yummy time, and everyone comes and goes to their spot so they can get their food. So while everyone's eating, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about liver. It's a softer organ meat. I found it is best to keep it in a separate container. Those of you who want to play with beef liver, I have discovered that it's much, much richer than the chicken and turkey or fowl livers. And in my home, because it's rich, I limit it to maybe 1 time a week. Sometimes it's only a couple times a month. And if I'm using beef liver, I definitely have to make sure that I am not mixing the beef liver with the chicken livers. And again, I've just discovered it's better to keep it in its own container. It's a lot bloodier, and cutting it up beforehand kind of is a waste of time because it falls apart easily. So what I find is it's easier to keep the chunks of liver together, and then right before you're getting ready to do the mealtime for that particular session, cut up the chunks into their bowls. It's really lovely sometimes if you're using like a pate or a chunky chicken that already has liver in it. I find when I do a liver combination, the food is literally gone within 15 minutes. It blows my mind how quickly that gets taken. But what you'll notice is when you actually go to stir the wet in with the liver, it's wetter. So can you see how wet this is? So when you're adding water in with liver, you may not have to put as much water in because you already have a really soupy kind of configuration there. So let's go back in and check in on the animals. It's been 30 minutes since I put the dishes down, and here's where the dishes look like after 30 minutes. So you can tell that we have, one is clean, there's some morsels left in each other, and when I look around the house, everybody's kind of bathing themselves or taking a little bit of break. So we'll check in it again at the end of the video just to see how they're doing. While we're waiting, let's talk about storing your food. I have found that I want to keep my wet meat separate than where my oil is. So I have these little containers that I put Kitty on there. So when I have somebody coming over that takes over my duties, if I'm out of town, I can have the wet in this container. Putting a piece of paper towel under at the bottom will absorb any leakage. If you have any leakage of blood, especially if you're dealing with livers. I put the oil and the scoops inside its own container, and then both those two go into the refrigerator. In that one container, I have any of the loose meats the raw food that I'm working on, and then the other packaged meat that you've already cut up, those can go in the freezer. And what I find that by putting everything in the freezer, you can take one of those baggies out every couple days, and you have fresh raw food already pre-cut for when you're ready to do your meal prep. And I can honestly tell you it takes maybe 20 minutes to cut up one of those packages of gizzards and hearts. So however your time works, sometimes I like to put an audiobook on or music on while I'm cutting up meat. I do find that once you have the meat prepared, literally when it's time to feed my crew, it takes all of 5 minutes to take everything out, put them in the dishes, and feed. So from the start to finish of actual putting things in the dishes, once the meat's already cut, it's a 5-minute process. So it's very quick once you have this going for yourself. Let's go check in on those kitties again. It's been an hour now since we did feeding, and let's just see what's happening. Ooh, look at this. Empty, empty, empty. Happy, happy kitties. So what I can tell you is now we've been on raw food for going on 2 months now. 2 months is how I've been doing this process here. And wow, I have to tell you, Sweet Car is acting like a kitten. She is running all over the place. She's playing with toys again, which she hadn't done for a couple years. The white that was in her face is she's growing in new fur. So she's young. She's got this, little baby's face again. She no longer has those big patches of bare fur spots. And her weight, we just went to the vet a couple days ago, and her weight is literally, she was at 10.2, and she was up to like 13 pounds. Little Bear, he's always been a, here we come, baby kid. And he was way up, and he's now down to 12 pounds. And Bella is hanging right in there at 10.2, 10.3. And all of them, their fur is so healthy. Their fur is so vibrant. Their behavior, like I said, they're all playing. They're rolling around. They're goofing off. They're chasing toys. The vibrancy that I'm noticing in them from being on raw food and this combination that I've showed you in this video is totally phenomenal. So you now have information. I highly encourage you to go play with this yourself. See what works for you, and be part of the solution of allowing your baby to be healthy, to be vibrant, to find that happy wag in their tail. So this is Dr. Nadine. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.